Well, as long as I'm talking about Paul Maxwell, remembered. I remember one when right before they moved to Alvoy, they lived down South Alvoy on a dirt road. There's sharecropping out there. What you folks need to know about living that way in Texas and back in that part of the mid-century of the 20th century, 1900 and something or other. I used to raise some hogs and had a milk cow. You know, when you're sharecropping, you're just barely hanging on. And anyway, we used to have in the kitchen they'd have a 5-gallon can that was called a slop bucket. That's what we called it, slop bucket, and everything off the kitchen table, trash, potato peelings, everything like that went in the slop bucket. And twice a day, you slopped the hogs. Slopped hogs in the morning, slopped hogs in the evening. And Paul Maxwell, he had that bad hip and a crutch, and that was one of the jobs he did, was he had slopped hogs. Well, he also had some bran meal that sometimes if you get a little head, they'd mix that in with the water, and because that bran was awful dry even for the hogs. And the hog trough that they had was a V-shaped, you know, like a couple of 2x12s put together like this, and a board on each end, and that made a trough. And depending on how long the 2x12s was, that's how much trough you had, you know. And they'd always put that right out there by the hog pen, and where you always had the hogs inside of a hog wire fence. That's ones you town folks with the little squares like this, squared about like that, and about 4 feet tall, 3 feet, 4 feet tall of hog wire, we called it. And you run that around the hog pen, and it might be a half acre, it might be 12 acres, whatever you had. And that hog trough you'd put right there closest to the house, because that's where you're going to slop them. You don't want to carry that thing too far, especially if you're a crippled old man. And they'd put a 2x4 between two fence posts and next to that hog wire, so that we call that a bump bar. And you go out there and bump that slop bucket against that bump bar over into the hog trough, and of course it had to fall a couple of feet into that hog. And it was messy, but hogs are messy. Hogs eat messy, you know. They're all over each other, on top of each other. And that's just the way hogs are. Sorry if that offends you, but that's the way it is. So Paul had finally gotten some false teeth. And I think it was the uppers that he had replaced first. And, you know, back in those days, false teeth was hard to come by, hard to get fitted, if you ever did get them fitted. And anyway, so on this particular occasion, it's in the afternoon, and Ma told me about this. She was standing on the porch watching Paul and he lumbered out there with that slop bucket. Of course, it wasn't full. 5 gallons wasn't full, because he didn't wait for it to get full. It'd be too heavy to carry. And so he wandered out there on the way from the house, he's calling the hogs, you know. Well, you really need 2 hands to call hogs, but he had one on that crutch. And it was, suey pig, suey pig, suey pig. And sometimes, if a guy was, you know, a little more sophisticated, it was, suey hog, suey hog. That's the way you called pigs and hogs, you know. And man, those suckers, they might have been pigs, they might have been hogs, but they knew when it was supper time, and here they came. And I mean, it was, they weren't slow. You might not know that hogs are pretty fast. I can tell you what, they can outrun a man. So here come the hogs, and Paul got that bucket up against the bump bar, and of course he just gets started pouring it in the slop into the trough, and here come these hogs. And you know, they're all over each other, and half this stuff is not going in the trough. It's going on the backs of the heads and onto the ground, and spilling and making a mess and wasting. And of course, now if you don't want the hogs, it's almost the same thing as calling hogs. It's suey hog, you know, suey, and you might put a dadgummit in there or something like that. Maybe starting with a D anyway. And so these hogs are up there all over each other, getting messed up, and then Paul seeing him making a mess and wasting all that hog feed, and he hollers, "Silly hogs!" and his false teeth come out. Yeah, yeah, that's right. And they went right down over that bump bar, right in there with the slop, in with the hogs. And this is the most precious thing in the house. It was before TV. Them false teeth were the most precious things I owned. That was more important than a coal oil lamp. That was, that was it. And Paul was hollering, "Now it's silly, you dadgum hog, silly." He came, and he goes over that bump bar into the trough with those hogs, head first, right over there in there, hollering, "Silly, you dadgum hogs, silly." And he fought them hogs. I think it was about 6 grown hogs that he fought off and got his teeth back before the hogs ate them. Ma said that he rinsed them off when he got to the house before he put them back in. But I tell you what, now you folks might think that's funny, but that ain't funny when the most precious things you got falls in the hog trough at hog feeding time. That's bad, and Paul knew it, well, saved the day. Forgot about that crutch. Forgot about that bad hip. He made a header over that, more like it wasn't a swan dive, but it's kind of like it. Paul Maxwell.